A Werewolf Shifter Romance by Lena, from Lena's Romance Library. Chapter 1. Cast Out into the Storm. The rain felt like punishment against Sarah's skin as she stumbled through the forest, her wedding dress, what was supposed to be her wedding dress, torn and muddy, clinging to her trembling frame. Each step away from Crescent Moon Pact territory was supposed to feel like freedom, but all she felt was the hollow ache where her heart used to be. Barren. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. Worthless. Marcus had spoken those words in front of the entire pack just hours ago, his voice cold and final as he rejected their mate bond. 3 years of believing she was meant to be Luna, 3 years of preparing to lead beside him, shattered in a single moment when the pack healer confirmed what Marcus had suspected. She couldn't give him the heirs he needed. I, Marcus Blackthorn, reject you, Sarah Nightingale, as my mate and Luna, he had declared, his amber eyes holding no trace of the warmth she'd once thought was love. The pack needs a strong bloodline, not a barren female who brings nothing but shame to our legacy. The collective gasp of the pack still rang in her ears, followed by murmurs of agreement that cut deeper than any blade. Her own adoptive family, the Nightingales who had taken her in as an orphaned child, had simply looked away, already calculating how to distance themselves from her disgrace. Lightning split the sky above, and Sarah forced herself to keep walking. She had nowhere to go, no money, no allies. The human world felt foreign and terrifying after a lifetime in the pack, but staying meant facing the daily humiliation of watching Marcus choose another Luna, another woman to bear the children Sarah's broken body never could. A branch caught her dress, tearing it further, and she nearly sobbed with frustration. Everything about this moment felt symbolic, her life ripping apart at the seams, leaving her exposed and vulnerable to elements she couldn't control. The forest grew denser as she walked, the familiar sense of her pack's territory fading into something wilder, more dangerous. These were the neutral lands, the no-man's zone between pack territories where rogues roamed and civilized wolves feared to tread. But what choice did she have? Rejected wolves rarely survived long in pack society, especially not ones branded as defective. Another crack of thunder made her jump, and she realized she was shaking, not just from cold, but from fear. Stories of what happened to lone wolves in these woods filtered through her memory. Rogues who had lost their humanity along with their pack bonds, becoming little more than feral beasts driven by hunger and rage. The rain intensified, turning the forest floor into a treacherous maze of mud and fallen branches. Sarah's bare feet, she'd lost her shoes somewhere in her desperate flight, slipped on wet leaves, sending her tumbling down a small embankment. Pain shot through her ankle as she landed hard, and she bit back a cry that would have been part physical agony, part pure despair. She was going to die out here, die alone, unmated, and forgotten. The moon goddess had played some cruel joke, giving her a wolf spirit but no way to fulfill her most basic biological purpose. Even now, her inner wolf was silent, as broken and ashamed as the human side of her nature. "Get up," she told herself fiercely, struggling to her feet despite the stabbing pain in her ankle. "Don't give them the satisfaction of being right about your weakness." But as she tried to put weight on her injured foot, the world tilted dangerously. She grabbed for a tree trunk to steady herself and froze at the sound that cut through the storm, a low, menacing growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Yellow eyes appeared in the darkness between the trees, reflecting the sporadic flashes of lightning. Not human eyes. Not civilized wolf eyes either. These held the wild, unpredictable gleam of a creature operating on pure instinct. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as more pairs of eyes materialized from the shadows. Rogues. At least 3, maybe more, forming a loose circle around her. She could smell their madness now, the sour scent of wolves who had been alone too long, who had forgotten what it meant to be part of something larger than their own hunger. The largest one stepped into view first, his human form lean and scarred, his dark hair hanging in matted tangles around a face that might have been handsome once, before madness carved harsh lines around his eyes and mouth. His grin revealed teeth that were too sharp, filed to points in some primitive ritual. "Well, well," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "What do we have here? A little lost lamb, dressed up like a bride?" His nostrils flared as he scented the air. "No, not human. Wolf. But something's wrong with her, isn't it, boys? She smells broken." The others chuckled, a sound devoid of any warmth or sanity. Sarah backed against the tree trunk, her injured ankle forgotten in the face of immediate danger. Rejected or not, her wolf instincts were still intact enough to recognize mortal peril when she saw it. "Please," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "I'm not in your territory. I'm just passing through." Passing through to where? The leader cocked his head like a predator studying prey. Rejected wolves don't have anywhere to go, do they? No pack, no protection, no purpose. He took a step closer, and she caught the full impact of his scent. Violence and desperation, and something else that made her stomach turn. "But we could give you a purpose. Couldn't we, boys?" The circle tightened, and Sarah realized with crystal clarity that she was about to die. Not cleanly, not quickly, but in a way that would make her grateful for death long before it came. She closed her eyes and tried to summon her wolf for one last stand, but her spirit remained stubbornly silent, as if even her animal side had accepted defeat. Then the world exploded into chaos. A roar shattered the night. Not the howl of a werewolf, but something deeper, more primal. Ancient power rolled through the forest like a physical force, making the very trees seem to bend in acknowledgement. The rogues' confident sneers transformed into expressions of terror as they spun to face this new threat. From the darkness emerged a wolf unlike any Sarah had ever seen. Massive didn't begin to describe him. He stood nearly as tall as a man at the shoulder, his coat a silver black that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. But it was his eyes that stole her breath. Not the yellow or amber typical of werewolves, but a deep, impossible blue that held intelligence far beyond that of any ordinary shifter. The lead rogue stumbled backward. "Alpha King," he breathed. The words barely audible over the storm. "We didn't know. We weren't in your lands." The great wolf's response was swift and brutal. He moved like liquid lightning, covering the distance between them in a single bound. His jaws closed around the rogue's throat, and the crack of breaking bones cut through the rain. The other rogues scattered like leaves before a hurricane, crashing through the underbrush in their desperation to escape. Sarah pressed herself against the tree trunk, hardly daring to breathe. The Alpha King, she'd heard whispers of him, the legendary shifter who ruled not just a single pack, but an entire network of allied territories. Ancient, powerful, and utterly ruthless in protecting his domain. And now his impossible blue gaze was fixed directly on her. The massive wolf padded closer, his steps silent despite his size. Up close, she could see the silver threading through his dark coat, the scars that spoke of countless battles won. He stopped just out of arm's reach and studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed down to her very soul. Then, impossibly, he began to shift. The transformation was unlike anything she'd witnessed, smooth and controlled, with none of the painful contortion most werewolves endured during the change. Within moments, a man stood before her, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the same silver-threaded black hair as his wolf form. His face was all sharp angles and strong lines, handsome in a way that spoke of power and danger in equal measure. But it was still those blue eyes that held her captive, ancient eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense she'd ever built. "You're bleeding," he said, and his voice was like whiskey poured over gravel, warm but with an edge that suggested it could cut when necessary. Sarah looked down at herself, surprised to see scratches on her arms and legs that she hadn't even noticed in her flight. Yes. I fell." "You're also trespassing," he continued, though his tone held more curiosity than threat. "These are neutral lands, but they fall under my protection. What's a pack wolf doing alone in rogue territory?" The question hit like a physical blow, bringing all her shame rushing back. "I'm not a pack wolf anymore," she whispered. "I was rejected, cast out." Something flickered in those blue depths. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He took a step closer and she caught his scent. Pine forests and winter storms, power and something else she couldn't name, but that made her wolf finally stir with interest. "By whom?" The question was deceptively quiet, but she heard the steel beneath it. "Marcus Blackthorn, of Crescent Moon Pack." The words tasted bitter on her tongue. "Because I can't." She swallowed hard, unable to finish. "Can't what?" His voice had gone even softer, which somehow made it more dangerous. "Have children," she forced out, the admission scraping her throat raw. "I'm barren, worthless to the pack." For a long moment, he simply stared at her, rain running down his face, his expression unreadable. Then he did something that shocked her to her core. He laughed. Not mockingly, but with genuine humor that transformed his harsh features into something almost boyish. "Worthless," he repeated, shaking his head. Marcus Blackthorn wouldn't recognize true worth if it bit him on his pretentious ass. Despite everything, Sarah felt her lips twitch toward a smile. That's not a very diplomatic thing to say about a fellow alpha. "I'm not a diplomat," he replied simply. "I'm Cale Stormwright, and you, little wolf, are coming with me." Before she could protest, he was moving, sweeping her up into his arms with an ease that spoke of supernatural strength. Her injured ankle throbbed with the sudden movement, but the pain was nothing compared to the shock of being held against his warm, solid chest. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "No, you can't. Your ankle is sprained, you're going into shock. And there are more rogues in these woods than just the ones I scattered." His arms tightened around her slightly. "You're under my protection now, Sarah Nightingale, whether you like it or not." The fact that he knew her name should have frightened her. Instead, as he carried her deeper into the forest toward whatever sanctuary he was taking her to, she found herself feeling something she hadn't experienced in years. Safe. Even if she had no idea what price that safety might demand. Chapter 2. Sanctuary of Shadows. The cabin materialized from the forest like something out of a fairy tale. All dark wood and glowing windows, smoke curling from the chimney into the stormy night. Sarah had expected something grand and imposing, befitting a ruler of his status. Instead, Cale carried her toward what appeared to be a simple hunter's lodge, albeit one that radiated an aura of ancient magic that made her skin prickle with awareness. "This isn't what I expected," she murmured against his chest, surprised by how natural it felt to be held by him. His scent wrapped around her like a warm blanket, calming her frayed nerves in ways she didn't understand. "What did you expect?" His voice rumbled through his chest, the vibration oddly soothing. "A throne room? A palace carved from moonlight?" "Something like that." She tilted her head to look up at him, studying the sharp line of his jaw. "You're not what I expected either." Those impossible blue eyes flicked down to meet hers. What did you expect? A monster, she admitted quietly. The stories about the Alpha King, they make you sound like something out of nightmares. Ruthless. Bloodthirsty. Ancient beyond measure. A smile ghosted across his lips. The first genuine one she'd seen from him. Ancient, yes. The rest? Well, that depends on who's telling the story. He shouldered open the cabin door, and warmth immediately enveloped them. The interior was surprisingly cozy. Leather furniture arranged around a massive stone fireplace. Shelves lined with books that looked older than her pack's entire history. And artwork that seemed to shift and move in the flickering firelight. Everything spoke of comfort earned through centuries of existence, but also of profound solitude. Cale set her carefully on the couch nearest the fire, and she immediately missed his warmth. He moved with fluid grace to tend the flames, and she found herself studying him in the dancing light. There was something almost ethereal about him, too perfect to be entirely real, yet solid and present in a way that made her hyper-aware of every breath he took. "You live alone," she observed, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I prefer it that way." He didn't look at her as he spoke, his attention seemingly focused on the fire. Fewer complications. Fewer disappointments. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. "That sounds lonely." "Loneliness is a luxury," he replied, finally turning to face her. "When you've lived as long as I have, you learn that solitude is safer than the alternative." "How long?" The question escaped before she realized how personal it was. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't." 600 years, give or take a decade. He said it matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather. "Long enough to watch empires rise and fall. Long enough to outlive everyone I've ever cared about." Sarah stared at him, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of that existence. 600? That's impossible. Even the oldest alphas don't live past 200. "I'm not like other alphas." His eyes held hers, and she saw something ancient and weary in their depths. "I'm not like anyone you've ever met, little wolf." The endearment sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Why do you call me that?" "Because that's what you are, isn't it? Small, fierce, and far more dangerous than anyone gives you credit for." He moved closer, and she caught that intoxicating scent again. Pine and winter storms and something uniquely him. "Your former alpha was a fool to let you go." "Marcus wasn't wrong about what I can't give him," she said quietly, her gaze dropping to her hands. "A pack needs heirs, a bloodline. I'm broken in that way." "Are you?" His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it that made her look up. Has any healer actually confirmed this? Or did Blackthorn simply decide your worth based on a few months of trying? Heat crept up her neck. Discussing her intimate life with Marcus felt wrong somehow. Especially with this man who made her pulse race in ways her former mate never had. The pack healer said, "Pack healers see what their alphas want them to see," Cale interrupted, a note of disgust in his voice. "They're politicians first, healers second. How thoroughly were you actually examined?" Sarah frowned, thinking back to the brief, uncomfortable appointment that had sealed her fate. She asked questions, felt my pulse, said my wolf was too weak to sustain pregnancy. The memory made her cringe. She barely touched me before declaring me barren. Something dangerous flickered in Cale's eyes. "That's not a medical examination. That's a performance designed to give your alpha the excuse he was looking for." "What do you mean?" But even as she asked, pieces began clicking into place. Marcus's growing distance over the past months. His sudden urgency to mate and produce an heir. the way he'd seemed almost relieved when the healer delivered her verdict. "I mean," Kale said carefully, settling into the chair across from her, "that Marcus Blackthorne needed a reason to reject you that wouldn't make him look like the selfish bastard he is. Rejecting a mate for political reasons is frowned upon, even among the more traditional packs. But rejecting a Barren mate? That's seen as a necessary sacrifice for the good of the pack." The words hit her like physical blows. "You think he planned this?" "I think he found his political marriage and needed you out of the way." Kale's voice was gentle, but his eyes blazed with anger on her behalf. "The question is, what did he promise the Nightingales to get them to go along with it?" Sarah's mind reeled. Her adoptive family's quick acceptance of her rejection, their refusal to meet her eyes as she was cast out. "They never really wanted me," she whispered. "I was just convenient. Until I wasn't." "Their loss." The simple words, spoken with absolute conviction, made her throat tight with unshed tears. She wiped at her eyes impatiently. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." Kale was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press against her very soul. "Because I know what it's like to be cast aside for not fitting into someone else's vision of what you should be." The legendary Alpha King? Cast aside? She couldn't hide her skepticism. "I wasn't always a king, Sarah. Once I was just a younger son in a minor pack, bonded to my childhood sweetheart, and certain that love was enough to conquer anything." His smile held no warmth. "I learned differently when my pack needed an alliance marriage, and I was ordered to reject her for a more politically advantageous mate." "Did you?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "No." The word was flat, final. "I chose love over duty, and I watched her die for my selfishness." Sarah's heart clenched at the pain in his voice. What happened? War, bloodshed, the kind of violence that follows when duty is abandoned for the sake of emotion. He looked at her then, and she saw centuries of regret in his eyes. "I've been paying for that choice ever since. Is that why you live alone? Why you never took another mate?" "Partly." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "But also because power like mine comes with a price. The magic that makes me what I am. It's not natural, Sarah. It's borrowed. And the terms of that borrowing make it dangerous for anyone to get too close." Her wolf stirred with interest at his words, sensing mystery and secrets that begged to be unraveled. "What kind of magic?" For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he extended his hand toward her, palm up, and spoke a single word in a language she didn't recognize. Blue flames danced across his skin, not hot enough to burn, but definitely supernatural in origin. "The kind that shouldn't exist," he said quietly, closing his fist and extinguishing the flames. "The kind that demands prices I'm not sure I'm willing to pay anymore." Sarah stared at his hand, her mind racing. She'd heard stories of old magic, the kind that predated the packs and modern shifter society. Magic that came with terrible costs and binding contracts. "What did you trade for it?" "Everything that matters." His smile was bitter. "My mortality, my ability to form pack bonds, my chance at a normal life. In exchange, I became something that could protect others, could serve as a neutral arbiter between warring factions. The Alpha King isn't just a title, Sarah. It's a prison sentence." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. Here was this powerful, legendary figure, and he was as trapped and lonely as she was. "Don't you ever regret it?" "Every day." He looked at her with those ancient blue eyes. "Especially when I meet someone who makes me remember what it felt like to want things I can't have." The words hung between them like a challenge, and Sarah felt something shift in the air around them. The space between their chairs seemed to shrink, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. "Kyle," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. "You should rest," he said, standing abruptly and breaking the spell. "Your body needs to heal from today's trauma. We can continue this conversation tomorrow." She wanted to protest, to demand answers to the dozen new questions spinning through her mind. But exhaustion was creeping in now that the adrenaline was fading, and her ankle throbbed with each heartbeat. "Where should I?" "The bedroom is upstairs. You'll find clothes that should fit. I keep supplies for unexpected guests." He moved toward the kitchen, putting distance between them. "I'll take the couch." As she stood carefully, testing her injured ankle, one more question escaped her. "Kyle, why did you save me tonight?" He paused in the kitchen doorway, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost missed it. "Because when I looked at you, I saw myself 600 years ago, broken, rejected, and convinced that everyone who said I was worthless might be right." He turned his head slightly, giving her a glimpse of his profile. "And because something about you makes my magic sing in ways it hasn't for centuries, which should terrify us both." With that cryptic statement, he disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Sarah alone with the fire and 1,000 new questions burning through her mind. Chapter 3. Dreams and Revelations. Sarah woke to the sound of voices drifting up from below, Kale's familiar rumble, and another lighter tone she didn't recognize. Pale morning light filtered through the bedroom windows, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was impossibly comfortable, the sheets soft against her skin, and the clothes Kale had provided fit perfectly, despite being clearly expensive and well-tailored. Too perfectly. As consciousness fully returned, fragments of the previous night came flooding back. The rejection, the rogues, Kale's impossible rescue, and even more impossible admissions. 600 years old. Ancient magic. A curse that kept him isolated from everyone who mattered. And the way he'd looked at her when he said she made his magic sing. Curiosity overrode caution as she crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear the conversation below. The voices were clearer now. Kyle, and definitely a woman, her tone sharp with what sounded like disapproval. "Reckless, even for you," the woman was saying. "Bringing her here, to your sanctuary? Do you have any idea what you've risked?" "I know exactly what I've risked, Elena." Kale's voice carried a warning edge. "The question is whether you're here as my healer or as the Council's spy." "Both, and you know it." There was the sound of papers rustling. "Her blood work is interesting. The preliminary tests show she's not barren at all. Quite the opposite, actually. Her fertility markers are off the charts, but there's something else. Something I've never seen before." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Not barren? But the pack healer had been so certain. "What kind of something else?" Kale's tone had gone deadly quiet. "Dormant magic. Old magic, Kale. The kind that runs in the original bloodlines, before the Great Dilution." Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "This girl isn't just any rejected wolf. She's a descendant of the first families, possibly even—" "Don't!" The word cracked like a whip. "Don't even think it. It would explain why your magic responds to her. Why you felt compelled to save her despite every instinct telling you to stay away." Papers rustled again. "The Council is already asking questions about the disturbance in the neutral lands. They know you interfered with pack business." Marcus Blackthorn's stupidity isn't pack business. It's a crime against nature itself. Furniture creaked as if Kale had stood abruptly. "How long do I have before they demand her return?" That depends on whether they believe she's truly worth the political risk you're taking. Elena's voice softened slightly. Kale, you know I care about you. You've been alone for so long, and I understand the temptation. But if she is what I think she is, keeping her will paint a target on both your backs that even your power might not be able to erase. Let me worry about the council. There was movement below, footsteps pacing across the floor. What else did the tests reveal? She's been systematically poisoned. Low doses over several months, designed to suppress her wolf and interfere with her reproductive cycle. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. It's not something that would show up in a basic examination. The world tilted around Sarah as the implications hit her. Poisoned. Someone had been deliberately weakening her, making sure she appeared barren to justify her rejection. But who? And why? The Nightingales, Kale said, his voice filled with disgust. They had access, motive, and opportunity. The question is what Marcus promised them in return. Territory expansion, most likely. The Nightingales have been trying to claim the eastern forests for decades. Elena sighed. She's lucky you found her when you did. Another few weeks of exposure and the damage might have been permanent. How long before it's out of her system? With proper treatment? 2 weeks, maybe less. But Kale, Elena's voice carried a note of warning. When her wolf fully awakens, when her true nature emerges, there's no telling what will happen. If my suspicions are correct, she won't just be powerful, she'll be a beacon to every supernatural creature within 1,000 miles. Then I'll protect her. The simple statement carried the weight of absolute conviction. From everyone? From the council? From the other pack leaders who will see her as either a prize to be won or a threat to be eliminated? Elena's voice grew urgent. You can't fight the entire supernatural world, not even with your power. Watch me. Sarah heard Elena sigh heavily. I'll prepare the treatments and send word that I examined her and found nothing of interest. That should buy you some time. But Kale, be careful. The kind of magic that runs in her bloodline, it doesn't just attract allies. It draws predators too. I know. His voice was grim. I'll be ready for them. And what about her? Does she know what she is? What she's capable of? She will, when she's strong enough to handle the truth. The conversation moved away from the stairs, voices becoming too muted to follow. Sarah sank onto the top step, her mind reeling from everything she'd overheard. Not barren, poisoned, not worthless, descended from some kind of magical bloodline that made even the legendary Alpha King willing to risk everything to protect her. But why? What was so special about her heritage that it warranted such drastic measures to suppress it? And why did the thought of Kale keeping secrets from her, even to protect her, make her chest ache with disappointment? She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the silence below until footsteps began climbing the stairs. Panicking, she scrambled back toward the bedroom, but her injured ankle betrayed her, sending her stumbling against the wall with a barely suppressed cry of pain. Sarah? Kyle's voice was soft, concerned. Are you all right? She could lie, pretend she'd just woken up and hadn't heard anything. But something in his tone, the same gentleness he'd shown her last night, made her want to be honest with him. I heard, she said quietly, not turning around. Not all of it, but enough. She heard him stop on the stairs, the floorboards creaking under his weight. How much is enough? Enough to know that everything I believed about myself was a lie. She finally turned to face him, taking in his expression of careful neutrality. Enough to know that I'm apparently some kind of magical beacon that's going to put you in danger just by existing. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, that he wouldn't have to find a way to explain. And how do you feel about that? Confused, angry, terrified. She limped toward him, favoring her good ankle. But mostly, grateful. Grateful? He seemed genuinely surprised. You saved my life twice now, once from the rogues, and once from believing I was everything Marcus said I was. She stopped just out of arm's reach, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. Even if this magical bloodline thing gets us both killed, at least I'll die knowing the truth. You're not going to die. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her breath catch. I won't let anything happen to you. Why? The question that had been burning in her chest finally escaped. You barely know me. You've lived for 6 centuries without taking risks like this. What makes me worth breaking that pattern? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, and lifted his hand to cup her cheek with surprising gentleness. Because when I look at you, I see possibilities I thought were dead and buried centuries ago, he said quietly. Because your very existence challenges everything I believed about fate and second chances. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, sending electricity racing through her veins. And because when you're near me, the magic that has been both my blessing and my curse feels like it might actually serve a purpose worth the price I paid for it. The air between them crackled with tension, and Sarah found herself leaning into his touch despite every rational thought telling her this was dangerous. He was ancient, cursed, powerful beyond her comprehension, and she was just a rejected wolf with a mysterious bloodline and no idea how to control whatever power supposedly ran through her veins. But when he looked at her like that, like she was something precious and miraculous rather than broken and worthless, none of the obstacles seemed to matter. Kyle, she whispered, not sure what she wanted to say, but needing to fill the charged silence between them. I should let you rest, he said, but he didn't move away. Elena left medication for the poisoning. You'll need to take it with food. What will happen when it's out of my system? She had to ask, even though part of her feared the answer. When my true nature emerges? I don't know, he admitted. But whatever happens, you won't face it alone. The promise in his words made her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. The woman, Elena, she said there would be predators, others who would want to use me. Let them come. His voice carried the dangerous edge she'd heard when he faced the rogues. They'll learn why challenging the Alpha King is a mistake that few live to repeat. Despite the gravity of the situation, Sarah felt her lips curve into a small smile. You're very confident for someone who's supposedly been alone for centuries. I had forgotten what it felt like to have something worth fighting for. His hand was still on her face, his thumb now tracing the curve of her lower lip. You've reminded me. The simple admission sent heat spiraling through her, and she saw her own desire reflected in the depths of his ancient eyes. They were standing at the edge of something that would change everything. She could feel it in the way the air around them seemed to shimmer with possibility. But before either of them could take that final step, a howl echoed through the forest outside. Long, mournful, and uncomfortably familiar. Kale's expression went cold, his hand dropping from her face as he moved to the window. Shit. What is it? But even as she asked, Sarah knew. That howl belonged to Marcus Blackthorn. Your former mate has come calling, Kale said grimly, blue flames already beginning to dance around his fingers. And he's not alone. Chapter 4. The Claiming. The howl came again, closer this time, followed by 2 others in harmony. Sarah's wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, recognizing the call of her former pack but feeling no urge to answer. If anything, the sound made her want to run deeper into Kale's sanctuary, away from the life that had rejected her so completely. "How many?" she whispered, moving to stand beside him at the window. "3. Marcus, and 2 of his betas by the scent." Kale's jaw was tight with controlled anger. "They're at the tree line, trying to decide if they have the balls to actually approach my territory." Sarah peered through the glass and caught sight of movement in the shadows between the trees. Even at this distance, she could make out Marcus's familiar silhouette, his auburn hair catching the morning light. Beside him stood his cousin Derek and another man she didn't recognize, all of them in human form, but radiating the tense energy of wolves preparing for a fight. What do they want? But even as she asked, she knew. Marcus had never liked losing anything he considered his, even if he'd thrown it away himself. To retrieve stolen property, most likely. Kale's voice dripped with disgust. In his mind, rejecting you didn't void his claim. It just gave him the right to decide where you go next. The casual cruelty of that assessment hit her like a physical blow. He can't just... He can try. Blue flames flickered higher around Kale's hands, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. The question is whether he's stupid enough to challenge me on my own land for the sake of his wounded pride. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's voice carried across the distance, magically amplified so it would reach the cabin. "Stormright, I know you're in there. Send out my mate, and we can resolve this without bloodshed." Sarah flinched at the possessive term. "I'm not his mate anymore. He rejected me in front of the entire pack." "Rejection can be retracted under certain circumstances," Kale said grimly. "Especially if the rejecting party claims they were acting under false information or duress. But the pack healer will say whatever Marcus pays her to say." He turned from the window to face her fully. He's realized his mistake. A wolf with your bloodline, even if he doesn't fully understand what that means, is too valuable to let slip away. Especially to someone like me. The implications made her stomach churn. So I'm just a political chess piece? Something to be traded and claimed based on my usefulness? Kale's expression softened slightly. To him, yes. To me, he stepped closer, his hands finding her shoulders. To me, you're the first thing in centuries that's made me remember what it feels like to hope. Before she could respond to that devastating admission, Marcus's voice came again, sharper this time. "I can smell her, Stormright. She carries my scent still. By pack law, she belongs with me until the rejection is formally dissolved." "Pack law?" Kale muttered. "As if I give a damn about pack law." But Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Whatever power he wielded, whatever authority came with his title, there were still rules and politics to navigate. "What happens if you refuse to let me go?" "War, most likely. Marcus doesn't have the strength to challenge me directly, but he has allies. The council has been looking for an excuse to clip my wings for decades." His blue eyes met hers, ancient and weary. "Are you worth that kind of trouble, little wolf? Worth watching the supernatural world tear itself apart?" The question hung between them like a blade. Sarah thought of everything she'd learned in the past day. The lies, the poisoning, the hidden bloodline that apparently made her valuable enough to risk everything for. But beneath all of that was something simpler and more powerful. The way Kale looked at her, the way he'd held her last night, the way his very presence made her feel safe and cherished for the first time in her life. "I don't want to be the cause of war," she said quietly, "but I won't go back to him. Not after everything I know now." Something fierce and protective flashed in Kale's eyes. "Then you won't, whatever the consequences." "Sarah!" Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. "I know you can hear me." Don't let this ancient monster fill your head with lies. You belong with your own kind, not hiding away with some relic who sees you as nothing more than a curiosity. The words stung, even coming from Marcus. Was that what this was? Had Kale's interest in her been purely academic, driven by whatever magical anomaly ran in her blood? As if reading her thoughts, Kale's hands tightened on her shoulders. "Look at me," he said urgently. "Whatever else happens, whatever lies he tells, know this. My interest in you has nothing to do with your bloodline and everything to do with who you are. The magic, the politics, the ancient power, none of that matters compared to the way you make me feel human again after 6 centuries of existing like a ghost." Kale, no. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You asked me yesterday why I saved you. It wasn't because of some magical resonance or political calculation. It was because when I saw you standing there, broken and defiant and beautiful in your pain, something inside me that I thought was dead forever suddenly came back to life." The raw honesty in his voice made her throat tight. What if they're right? What if I'm just going to bring you trouble you don't need? Then we'll face it together. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I've been alone for so long, Sarah. I'd forgotten what it felt like to want someone's happiness more than my own safety." Outside, Marcus was growing impatient. "5 minutes, Stormright. Then I'm coming in after her. Territory laws be damned." "He won't really," Sarah began. "He will." Kyle's expression had gone cold again. Marcus Blackthorne is exactly the kind of fool who would start a war rather than admit he made a mistake. He stepped back from her, blue flames beginning to dance around his entire body. "Stay here. Whatever happens, don't come downstairs until I call for you." "I'm not hiding while you fight my battles," she said firmly. "This started because of me. You should trust me to handle this." The gentleness was back in his voice, but underneath it lay steel. "Please, Sarah, let me protect you the way I couldn't protect her." The pain in those last words stopped her protests cold. She saw the ghost of his first love in his eyes, the woman whose death still haunted him after all these centuries. He needed this, needed to prove to himself that he could save someone who mattered to him. "Just be careful," she whispered. He smiled then, quick and devastating. "Careful isn't really my style." Before she could respond, he was moving, heading for the stairs with that fluid grace that spoke of barely leashed power. Sarah watched him go, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the window, she could see Marcus and his betas had emerged from the tree line, advancing across the clearing with the confident swagger of wolves who believed they held the stronger position. They had no idea what they were walking into. The front door opened with deliberate slowness, and Kale stepped onto the porch. Even from her vantage point upstairs, Sarah could feel the shift in the air around him. Power uncoiling like a living thing, ancient and terrible and beautiful. The very ground seemed to respond to his presence, frost spreading outward from his feet despite the warm morning air. "Marcus Blackthorne." Kale's voice carried easily across the clearing, deceptively calm. "You're trespassing." "I'm retrieving stolen property," Marcus shot back. But Sarah noticed he'd stopped advancing. Even his betas looked nervous now, their earlier confidence wavering in the face of Kale's obvious power. "Property?" The single word dripped with menace. Interesting choice of terminology for a woman you publicly rejected and cast out. "That rejection was made under false pretenses. I've since learned that my mate was not Barren as reported." Marcus lifted his chin defiantly. "I'm prepared to retract the rejection and take her back." "How generous of you." Kyle took a single step forward, and ice began forming on the porch railings. "Tell me, Marcus, in all your magnanimous planning, did you bother to ask what Sarah wanted? Or is her opinion as irrelevant now as it was when you humiliated her in front of your entire pack? Sarah's breath caught at the controlled fury in Cale's voice. He was fighting for her, not just protecting her, but defending her worth, her right to choose. It was something Marcus had never done, something she'd never even thought to expect. "She's confused," Marcus said dismissively. "Traumatized by recent events. She needs time to remember where she belongs. She belongs wherever she chooses to be." Another step forward, and now the very air around Cale shimmered with barely contained power. "And she's chosen to stay with me." Your ancient history, Stormright. A relic clinging to power that should have passed to a new generation centuries ago. Marcus's voice rose, desperation bleeding through his bravado. "What could you possibly offer her that a real mate couldn't?" Cale's smile was sharp as winter wind. "Respect, protection, the freedom to be herself rather than whatever convenient fiction serves your political ambitions." His eyes flashed with blue fire. "And perhaps most importantly, a man who sees her worth before he needs her power." The words hit their mark. Marcus flinched, his careful composure cracking. "Enough games. She's coming with me. Now." "No," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly from the window as she pushed it open. "I'm not." All eyes turned upward to where she stood framed in the morning light. Marcus's expression cycled through surprise, anger, and something that might have been genuine hurt. But it was Cale's face that held her attention, the way his entire being seemed to steady when their eyes met, as if her presence alone gave him strength. "Sarah," Marcus called up to her, his tone shifting to the cajoling warmth he'd once used to win her over. "You don't understand what he is, what he's capable of. Come down here and let's talk about this properly." "I understand perfectly." She gripped the windowsill, drawing strength from Cale's steady gaze. "I understand that you poisoned me for months to make sure I appeared barren. I understand that you rejected me not because I was worthless, but because I was inconvenient. And I understand that you're only here now because you've realized what you threw away." Marcus's face went white. "That's not... Who told you? Does it matter?" Sarah's voice was stronger now, filled with a confidence she'd never known she possessed. "I know the truth, Marcus. All of it. And the truth is that I would rather die than go back to a life where my worth is measured by my usefulness to your ambitions." "You heard her," Kyle said quietly, but his words carried the weight of absolute finality. "Time to leave, Marcus, before I decide that letting you walk away intact is more mercy than you deserve." For a moment, Sarah thought Marcus might actually retreat. Then his expression hardened into something ugly and desperate. "If I can't have her," he snarled, "then neither can you." The attack came without warning, not from Marcus, but from Derek, who shifted mid-leap and launched himself toward the porch with claws extended and fangs bared. Chapter 5. Awakening Fire. Time seemed to slow as Derek's massive wolf form hurtled through the air toward Cale. Sarah's scream caught in her throat. But Cale moved with inhuman speed, his form blurring as blue flames erupted around him like a second skin. When Derek's claws met that supernatural fire, the sound was like metal striking stone, and the beta wolf went flying backward with a howl of pain and surprise. But Derek's attack had been a distraction. While Cale dealt with the charging beta, Marcus and the third wolf had circled around, and now Marcus was scaling the side of the cabin with the fluid grace of a shifter in partial transformation. His eyes had gone wolf-bright with determination as he climbed toward Sarah's window. "Cale!" she called out, backing away from the window as Marcus's clawed hand appeared on the sill. Below, Cale spun toward the cabin, his blue eyes blazing with fury. But Derek was already recovering, shaking off his injuries with the resilience of his kind. And the third beta was moving to flank Kale from the opposite side. Even with his supernatural power, fighting 3 wolves at once while protecting the cabin would be nearly impossible. Marcus hauled himself through the window with predatory grace, his partially shifted form towering over Sarah in the small bedroom. His fangs were extended, his fingernails having become razor-sharp claws, but it was the possessive hunger in his eyes that made her blood run cold. "Did you really think some ancient relic could keep you from me?" His voice was distorted by the partial shift, more growl than words. "You're mine, Sarah. You've always been mine." "I was never yours," she shot back, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I was just too naive to see it." "Naive," he agreed, stalking toward her with deliberate slowness. "But that can be fixed. A few months back in my territory, away from his influence, and you'll remember where you belong." Sarah's back hit the bedroom wall, but instead of feeling trapped, something else began to build inside her chest. Heat. Power. The same electric energy she'd felt when Kale looked at her, but stronger now, more focused, more dangerous. "I said no, Marcus." Her voice carried an authority she'd never possessed before, and something flickered in Marcus's expression. Confusion, then alarm. The air around Sarah began to shimmer with the same strange heat she'd seen around Kale's flames. "What?" Marcus began, then stopped as the scent hit him. Power. Old power. The kind that made even alpha wolves take notice. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're just a low-ranking wolf. You can't." "Can't what?" The heat was spreading through Sarah's body now, making her skin glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with the morning sun. "Can't have power of my own? Can't be anything more than what you decided I was worth?" Downstairs, the sounds of battle intensified. She could hear Kale's roar of fury, the crack of supernatural energy meeting supernatural resistance, and knew he was being overwhelmed by the coordinated attack. They had planned this carefully, separate them, divide his attention, make him choose between protecting her and protecting himself. "Sarah." Marcus's voice had gone soft, almost pleading. "Whatever you think you're feeling, it's not real. You're not a magic user. You're just a normal wolf who got caught up in something bigger than yourself." But even as he spoke, his body language told a different story. He was backing away from her, his nostrils flaring as he tried to process the scent of power that was growing stronger with each passing second. "You're right about one thing," Sarah said, taking a step toward him. "I did get caught up in something bigger than myself, but it wasn't Kale's influence. It was the truth about what you did to me, what you stole from me, what you tried to bury because it threatened your neat little plans." The light around her was getting brighter now, and she could feel something awakening in her blood. Ancient, primal, demanding recognition. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one more step would change everything forever. A crash from below decided it for her. The sound of Kyle hitting something hard, followed by his sharp intake of breath, pain radiating through whatever strange connection had formed between them. Without conscious thought, Sarah stepped forward into that vast, unknown power, and everything changed. The transformation wasn't like a normal shift. Instead of the painful breaking and reforming of bones, this felt like shedding a skin that had never quite fit. Light poured from her, not the cold blue of Kale's flames, but something warmer, golden, alive with possibility. Her wolf surged forward, but it wasn't the small, timid creature she'd always known. This was something magnificent and terrible, silver-white with eyes that blazed like stars. Marcus stumbled backward with a strangled cry. "Moon goddess, preserve us. You're one of them. The firstborn." Even in her transformed state, Sarah understood the significance of those words. The firstborn. The original werewolf bloodlines. The ones who had possessed magic before the great dilution scattered their power to the winds. She'd heard the stories, dismissed them as legends, but the power flowing through her veins felt ancient enough to be truth. Down, her wolf snarled, and Marcus dropped to his knees as if compelled by a force greater than his own will. You will not harm what is ours. The possessive fury in her own thoughts should have shocked her, but it felt right. Natural. Kale was hers to protect, just as she was his to cherish. The bond between them wasn't just attraction or even love. It was recognition. Soul calling to soul across centuries of loneliness. She could feel him now, his pain and determination. His fear not for himself, but for her. The connection flowed both ways, and through it, she sent him strength, power, the certainty that she was no longer the helpless wolf who needed rescuing. Downstairs, Kale's roar shook the entire cabin, but now it carried notes of triumph rather than desperation. Whatever she had awakened in herself, it was feeding back through their bond, amplifying his own abilities. Sarah, Marcus whispered from his position on the floor. Please, I didn't know. If I had realized what you were, you would have caged me even more carefully, she finished, her wolf's voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in the very bones of the cabin. Used my power for your own ambitions, instead of simply discarding me when I proved inconvenient. I wouldn't have. You poisoned me. Each word fell like a judgment. For months, you fed me substances designed to suppress my true nature, to make me appear weak and barren so you could justify throwing me away for a more politically advantageous match. Marcus's face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. The healer said it would wear off eventually, and by then I would have secured the alliance I needed. I was going to take you back afterward, I swear. After you used me. After you broke me. After you let everyone I'd ever known believe I was worthless. The golden light around her pulsed with her anger. Did you think I would simply forgive and forget? That I would be grateful for your scraps of affection after you were done with your political games? I loved you, he said desperately. I still love you. That has to count for something. No, she said, and the finality in her voice seemed to echo from the walls themselves. Love doesn't poison. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't throw away something precious for the sake of convenience. The sounds of fighting below had stopped, replaced by an ominous silence. Through her connection with Kyle, she felt his approach, steady footsteps on the stairs, controlled power radiating from every movement. He was hurt but victorious, and the protective fury that had driven him to fight 3 wolves at once was slowly giving way to something else. Wonder. Recognition. A joy so profound it took her breath away. Sarah? His voice from the doorway was soft, reverent. My God, you're beautiful. She turned toward him, still glowing with her newly awakened power, and saw herself reflected in his ancient blue eyes. Not the broken, rejected wolf she'd believed herself to be, but something magnificent and powerful and worthy of protection. Worthy of love. The transformation began to fade as her emotions stabilized, the golden light dimming until she stood before them in human form once more. But she could feel the power still humming beneath her skin, ready to answer her call whenever she needed it. The firstborn, Cal said, his voice filled with awe. I felt the resonance, but I never imagined. Sarah, do you understand what this means? It means Marcus is leaving, she said firmly, not taking her eyes off Kale's face. Now, before I decide that mercy is a luxury I can't afford. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his earlier arrogance completely shattered. The council will hear of this. They'll want to know about her bloodline, her power. Let them come, Kyle said mildly, blue flames dancing around his fingers in casual display. I've been looking forward to a proper fight for decades. You can't protect her from everyone, Marcus snarled, some of his defiance returning. There are forces in this world that will see her as either a weapon to be claimed or a threat to be eliminated. You're signing both your death warrants. Then we'll die together, Sarah said simply, free and unashamed, instead of living as prisoners to other people's expectations. The words hung in the air like a vow, and she saw Kale's expression shift into something that took her breath away. Not just desire or protectiveness, but recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone else who would choose love over safety, truth over convenience. Get out, Kale said quietly, his attention never leaving Sarah's face. Take your remaining beta and leave my territory. If I see any of you again, I won't be so generous. Marcus hesitated for a moment, perhaps weighing his options one final time. Then survival instinct won out over pride, and he headed for the window with the swift efficiency of a man who knew when he was beaten. This isn't over, he called back as he prepared to climb down. The council will find us ready, Sarah finished. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Marcus's expression cycled through anger, regret, and something that might have been genuine loss before he dropped out of sight. Within moments, she could hear the sound of retreat, footsteps and voices fading as the three wolves withdrew from Kale's territory. Then it was just the two of them, standing in the morning light streaming through the bedroom window, the air still crackling with residual power and possibility. So, Sarah said, suddenly feeling shy despite everything that had just happened. Firstborn, that's significant. Significant enough to change everything, Kale agreed, stepping closer. Your bloodline doesn't just carry power, Sarah. It carries responsibility. There will be others who want to use you, control you, eliminate you as a threat to the established order. Are you trying to scare me away? She asked, though she was smiling now. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing. His hands found her face, cradling it gently. Because once we take this step, once we acknowledge what's growing between us, there will be no going back. No safe harbor, no easy choices. Good, she said, surprising herself with her own certainty. I'm tired of safe. I'm tired of easy. I want whatever this is, whatever we could become together, consequences be damned. His smile was radiant. In that case, my fierce little wolf, I think it's time you learned exactly what kind of magic runs in your veins, and what we can accomplish when we stop fighting against fate. Chapter 6. The Price of Power. The training began at sunset, when the veil between worlds grew thin, and magic flowed more freely through the ancient forest. Kale led Sarah to a clearing behind the cabin where carved stones formed a perfect circle, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the fading light. This is beautiful, Sarah breathed, running her fingers over one of the weathered stones. The moment her skin made contact, the carvings flared with golden light, the same warm glow that had surrounded her during the confrontation with Marcus. How old is this place? Older than the Pax, older than recorded shifter history. Kale moved to the center of the circle, blue flames dancing around his hands as he began lighting a series of torches arranged around the perimeter. The firstborn use circles like this to focus their power, to commune with the magic that flows through all living things. And you know how to use them because... She let the question hang in the air, watching as each torch burst into flame at his touch. Because I'm older than I've told you, he admitted, his back still to her. Not just 600 years, Sarah. Closer to 1,000. The number should have shocked her, but instead she felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. You knew the firstborn. Personally. I was there when the last of the pure bloodlines went into hiding. He turned to face her, and in the torchlight she could see the weight of centuries in his eyes. I watched them scatter their children to the four winds, diluting their power through marriage with lesser bloodlines to keep them safe from those who would have used them as weapons. But my family, the Nightingales, they were just mid-level pack members. Nothing special. Even as she said it, Sarah knew it wasn't true. The power that had awakened in her today felt too vast, too ancient to be anything diluted or weakened. The Nightingales were your adoptive family, Cale reminded her gently. What do you remember about your birth parents? Sarah frowned, reaching back through memories that had always seemed frustratingly vague. Nothing, really. They told me my parents died in a car accident when I was very young, that I was found wandering the forest, traumatized and alone. No car accident. No random tragedy. Cale's voice was soft but certain. Your parents were Lydia and Thomas Moonweaver, the last mated pair of pure firstborn blood. They died protecting you from those who would have seen a child with your potential as either a prize to be claimed or a threat to be eliminated. The names hit her like physical blows, awakening something deep in her memory. Flashes of faces she'd thought were dreams. A woman with silver hair singing lullabies that made flowers bloom. A man whose laughter could call birds from the trees. Moonweaver, she whispered. I used to dream about that name. Dreams have power for those with magic in their blood. Cale stepped closer, his expression infinitely gentle. Your parents hid you among the Nightingales because they were distant cousins. Enough firstborn blood to hide your scent, but not enough to attract attention. It should have kept you safe until you came of age. But Marcus found out somehow. The pieces were falling into place now, painting a picture of manipulation that went back years. That's why he courted me so carefully. Why he was so patient with the mate bond forming slowly. He knew what I was. Not at first, but as you grew stronger, as your magic began to manifest in small ways, someone noticed. Someone who understood the signs. Cale's jaw tightened with anger. The Nightingales sold you out. Probably for territory, maybe for protection. And Marcus saw an opportunity to bind one of the most powerful bloodlines to his pack. Until I became inconvenient. Sarah's hands clenched into fists, golden light flickering around her fingers. Until keeping me meant more risk than reward. The poisoning wasn't just to suppress your fertility, Cale said grimly. It was to suppress your magic. Keep you weak and compliant until he decided what to do with you. If you hadn't awakened today, if the stress of the confrontation hadn't burned the toxins from your system, I would have died, she finished. Slowly, quietly, written off as another weak wolf who couldn't survive without pack protection. Yes. The single word carried a universe of regret. I should have found you sooner. Should have been watching, protecting. How could you have known? Sarah stepped into the circle beside him, drawn by the pain in his voice. You said the bloodlines were scattered, hidden. Even with all your power, you couldn't be everywhere at once. I made a promise. His voice was barely above a whisper. To your parents, before they died. I swore I would find their daughter when she came of age, would teach her to use her gifts safely. I failed them. I failed you. The anguish in his confession broke something open in Sarah's chest. She reached for him without thinking, her hands finding his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You saved me. When it mattered most, when I was seconds away from death or worse, you were there. How is that failure? Because you suffered alone for years when you should have been cherished. Because you believed yourself worthless when you carry the most precious gift in our world. His hands covered hers, pressing them more firmly against his skin. Because I let my own fear of caring too much keep me from searching harder, looking closer. "What happened to your first mate?" Sarah said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. "She was firstborn too, wasn't she?" Kale's eyes closed in pain. "Ariana Starweaver, Lydia's younger sister. We were bonded when we were barely more than children, convinced that love would be enough to protect us from the politics and power games of our world. But it wasn't. No, when the purges began, when the council decided that concentrated firstborn power was too dangerous to allow, I tried to hide her. Tried to keep her safe while still fulfilling my duties as a pack alpha." His voice broke slightly. "I thought I could have both. I thought I was strong enough to protect everything that mattered." "What happened?" Sarah's thumbs brushed across his cheekbones, wiping away tears she didn't think he realized he was shedding. "They used her to get to me. Captured her while I was away dealing with pack business I thought was too important to ignore. By the time I returned..." He shuddered. "They had tortured her, trying to force her to reveal the locations of other firstborn families. She died rather than betray anyone." Oh, Kale. Sarah's heart ached for the man he'd been, young and idealistic and utterly unprepared for the cruelty of their world. "I made the deal that night," he continued, his voice hollow with memory. "Traded everything I was for the power to destroy those who had taken her from me. The magic that makes me what I am now. It's not natural, Sarah. It's borrowed from forces that exist beyond death, beyond the boundaries of our world." "What kind of forces?" But even as she asked, she thought she knew. The cold edge to his power, the way shadows seemed to bend around him, the unnatural blue of his flames. All of it spoke of magic that came from places the living weren't meant to touch. Death itself. His smile was bitter. "I am, quite literally, a dead man walking. The magic keeps me functional, keeps me powerful, but at the cost of everything that made me truly alive. I can't form pack bonds, can't create life, can't even feel real warmth or joy or..." "Can't what?" Sarah interrupted, her heart hammering. "Because when you look at me, when you touch me, it doesn't feel like you're dead. It feels like you're more alive than anyone I've ever known." "That's impossible." But his eyes held a desperate hope that belied his words. "The price of the power was clear. I gave up my humanity, my connection to life and warmth and maybe," Sarah said softly, her thumbs still tracing the strong lines of his face, "maybe what you gave up can be earned back. Maybe the magic that runs in my blood, the magic that comes from life and growth and creation, maybe it's exactly what you need to break free from whatever bargain you made in your grief." Sarah. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Even if that were possible, even if your power could somehow undo centuries of death magic, the risk is mine to take. She stepped closer, until they were breathing the same air, until she could feel the supernatural cold that surrounded him beginning to warm under her touch. "I've spent my whole life playing it safe, being what other people needed me to be, accepting limitations that were never real. I won't do that anymore. If you're wrong, if attempting to break the bond kills you, then at least I'll die trying to save someone I care about instead of wasting away as someone else's discarded property." She rose up on her toes, bringing her face level with his. "Besides, you said it yourself. We're stronger together than apart. Maybe that strength extends to breaking curses that seem impossible to break alone." The hope in his eyes was beautiful and terrifying. "You would risk everything on a maybe?" "I would risk everything on you," she corrected. "On us. On whatever this connection between us means." For a long moment, they simply stood there in the circle of ancient stones, surrounded by flickering torchlight and the growing darkness of night. Then Cale lowered his head until his forehead rested against hers, and Sarah felt something shift in the very air around them. "If we do this," he whispered, "if we try to break a bargain made with death itself, there's no guarantee what will happen to either of us. The magic could tear us apart from the inside, could change us into something neither human nor wolf. Could also set us both free," Sarah pointed out. "Could give us a chance at the kind of happiness that seems impossible right now. You're asking me to bet everything on a dream. I'm asking you to have faith." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes fully. "In your power, in mine, and in whatever force brought us together despite all the odds against it." Cale stared at her for a long moment, ancient wisdom warring with desperate hope in his expression. Then, slowly, he began to smile, the first truly joyful expression she'd ever seen from him. "You know what the most dangerous thing about you is?" he asked, his hands sliding down to frame her waist. "My newfound magical abilities?" she guessed, grinning back at him. "Your optimism," he said, but his tone was fond rather than critical. "It's absolutely infectious. Against all logic and experience, you're making me believe that maybe, just maybe, happy endings are possible after all. So you'll try? You'll let me help you break free from whatever bargain you made?" "I'll try," he agreed. "But not tonight. Tonight, I want to teach you to use your power properly, to understand what you're capable of before we attempt something as dangerous as unraveling death magic." Relief flooded through her. "Where do we start?" His smile turned wicked. "With fire, little wolf. Let's see just how brightly your light can shine." Chapter 7. Dancing with Fire. The first lesson nearly set the forest ablaze. "Feel the magic in your blood," Cale instructed, standing behind Sarah in the stone circle, his hands hovering just above her shoulders. "Don't force it. Don't fight it. Let it flow through you like water finding its course." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to sense the power that had erupted so naturally during the confrontation with Marcus. But in the calm of the training circle, with no immediate threat to drive her instincts, the magic felt elusive, like trying to grasp smoke. "I can't find it," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "This morning it was everywhere, overwhelming. Now it's like it doesn't exist." "Because this morning you were protecting someone you care about," Cale said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "Magic isn't just power, Sarah. For the firstborn, it's emotion given form. Love, fear, anger, joy. The stronger the feeling, the stronger the manifestation." His words sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with magic. "So I need to be emotional to access my power?" "Not emotional. Connected." His hands finally made contact, settling on her shoulders with gentle pressure. "The magic doesn't come from your mind, little wolf. It comes from your heart." The moment his skin touched hers, Sarah felt it, that golden warmth spreading through her veins like liquid sunlight. But this time it wasn't driven by anger or fear. This was something gentler, more profound. This was the magic that flowed between them, the connection that made her feel complete for the first time in her life. "There," Cale murmured, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Do you feel it now?" "Yes." The word came out breathless as light began to dance around her fingers. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful." His voice was thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "The way your power manifests, the light you create. I've never seen anything like it." The golden glow intensified, fed by his words and the way his hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. Sarah opened her eyes and gasped at what she saw. The light wasn't just surrounding her, it was reaching out toward Cale, wrapping around the blue flames that always danced at his fingertips. turning them from cold fire to something warm and alive. "Kyle," she whispered, turning in his arms to face him. "Look." He followed her gaze to their intertwined magic, and his expression shifted to something between wonder and terror. "That's not possible. Death magic and life magic, they're opposing forces. They should be destroying each other, not what?" She lifted her hand, watching as golden threads wound through his blue flames like they belonged there. "Not completing each other," he finished, his voice barely audible. "Sarah, what you're doing, it shouldn't work. The magic I carry is antithetical to everything you represent." "Maybe that's exactly why it does work." She stepped closer, until they were touching from chest to knee, until she could see herself reflected in the ancient depths of his eyes. Maybe opposing forces don't always destroy each other. Maybe sometimes they balance each other instead. His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. "You're asking me to believe in miracles. I'm asking you to believe in us." The golden light pulsed brighter, and she saw something she'd never expected. Tears gathering in Kale's eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." His smile was radiant despite the tears. "Everything's right for the first time in centuries. Do you know what you've just done? Besides nearly set us both on fire?" She gestured to where their combined magic was casting dancing shadows on the stone circle. "You've made me feel warm." His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. Really, truly warm. Not the artificial sensation of borrowed power, but actual warmth. Life. The kind of feeling I thought was lost to me forever. The confession hit her like a physical blow. To have been cold for centuries, truly cold in ways that went deeper than skin or bone. And now to feel warmth again. She couldn't imagine what that meant to him. "Kyle!" She rose up on her toes, bringing their faces closer together. "If our magic can do this much just by touching, imagine what we could accomplish if we really tried to break your curse. We could also destroy each other in the attempt." But his protest lacked conviction, and she could see the hope burning bright in his eyes. "Or we could save each other." Her hands found the solid warmth of his chest, feeling the steady beat of a heart that should have been silent centuries ago. "Either way, it's better than the half-life you've been living." Before he could respond, she kissed him. It was meant to be gentle, reassuring, a promise of possibilities to come. But the moment their lips met, the magic that had been dancing playfully around them exploded into something magnificent and terrifying. Light and shadow, life and death, warmth and cold, all of it swirling together in a display of power that lit up the entire forest. Kyle's response was immediate and overwhelming. His arms came around her, pulling her against him as if he could somehow merge their very souls through proximity alone. The kiss deepened, became desperate. 6 centuries of loneliness and longing poured into a single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the stone circle around them was glowing with residual magic. Several of the torches had gone out, their flames consumed by the supernatural energies they'd unleashed. Others burned brighter than ever, as if fed by their combined power. "Well," Sarah said shakily, "that was intense." "Intense is one word for it." Kyle's voice was rough with emotion. "Sarah, what just happened?" "Was a preview," she interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "Of what we could have together, if you're brave enough to try." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through disbelief, hope, and something that looked dangerously close to adoration. "You're really willing to risk everything on the chance that we can break a curse that's bound by death itself?" "I'm willing to risk everything on you," she corrected. "On us. On the possibility that sometimes love really is stronger than death." Love. He repeated the word like it was foreign to him, like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. Yes, love. She met his gaze steadily, letting him see every emotion in her heart. I know it's fast. I know it's dangerous. I know it probably makes no sense. But what I feel for you, it's not just attraction or gratitude or magical resonance. It's love, Kale. Pure and simple and terrifying. His response was to kiss her again, softer this time, but no less profound. When they parted, she could see centuries of walls crumbling in his eyes. I love you too, he whispered against her lips. God help us both. I love you too. The admission sent another pulse of magic through the circle, but this time it felt controlled, purposeful. As if the very universe was acknowledging the bond forming between them. So, Sarah said, trying to lighten the intensity of the moment before it overwhelmed them both. What's the next lesson in magical training? Kale's smile was soft and infinitely tender. Control. If we're going to attempt something as dangerous as unraveling death magic, you need to learn to harness your power consciously, not just when your emotions are running high. And how do we do that? Practice. Meditation. Learning to find that place of calm connection even when the world around us is chaos. His hand slid down to capture hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. It won't be easy. Your magic is tied to emotion, to passion, to the kind of deep feeling that doesn't like to be controlled. Sounds like you know me pretty well already, she teased. I know enough to understand that asking you to rein in your natural intensity is like asking the sun to shine less brightly. His expression grew serious. But Sarah, if we're going to do this, if we're really going to try to break the bonds that tie me to death, we need precision. One mistake, one moment of lost control, and we could both be destroyed. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, but instead of feeling crushing, it felt empowering. For the first time in her life, she had a purpose that went beyond survival, beyond simply existing on the edges of other people's lives. Then we'd better get started, she said firmly. Because I refuse to lose you now that I've found you. Even if the training is dangerous, even if learning to control power like yours requires pushing yourself to your absolute limits, especially then. Her smile was fierce with determination. I've spent my whole life being told I was weak, that I was less than everyone around me. I won't waste the chance to discover what I'm really capable of. Kyle studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. In that case, we start with fire. Real fire this time. Not just the light show we've been creating. Real fire? Sarah glanced around the clearing nervously. Are you sure that's safe? Nothing about what we're doing is safe, he pointed out. But fire is the foundation of all firstborn magic. Master that, and everything else becomes possible. He stepped back from her, moving to the edge of the circle, and Sarah immediately missed his warmth. But when he raised his hands and blue flames erupted around the perimeter of the stones, she understood. This wasn't just training, it was a test. Create fire, he instructed, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher rather than a lover. Not light, not warmth, actual flames that can burn, that can consume, that can protect or destroy as you will it. Sarah closed her eyes, reaching for that golden warmth in her chest. But without Kale's touch to guide her, without the emotional intensity of their kiss to fuel her, the magic felt distant again. I can't, she said after several minutes of fruitless concentration. Without you touching me, without that connection, then find a different connection. His voice was patient but firm. The magic is yours, Sarah. It doesn't belong to our bond. It belongs to you. What you felt when our power merged, that was just the beginning. You're capable of so much more. She tried again, searching for something to anchor her emotions, to give her magic direction and purpose. Images flashed through her mind. Marcus's betrayal, the years of believing herself worthless, the poison slowly draining her strength. But anger alone wasn't enough. She needed something deeper, something that connected her to the magic that flowed through all living things. Then she thought of Kale as he'd been tonight. Ancient, powerful, but fundamentally alone. Centuries of isolation, of believing himself cut off from warmth and joy and love. The image of him living that half-life, existing but not truly alive, filled her with a fierce protectiveness that had nothing to do with romantic love, and everything to do with recognizing a kindred spirit worth saving. Golden flames erupted from her hands, not the gentle glow she'd been creating, but true fire that danced and crackled with barely contained power. The heat of it warmed her face, and she opened her eyes to find Kale watching her with an expression of profound pride. "Beautiful," he said softly. "Now, can you hold it? Can you shape it? Can you make it do what you need it to do?" Sarah concentrated, and the flames responded, shifting from wild tongues of fire to a perfect sphere that hovered above her palms. Then, with a thought, she sent it spinning around the circle, leaving trails of golden light in its wake before calling it back to her hands. "How did that feel?" Kale asked. "Like coming home," she admitted. "Like this is what I was always meant to do." "Good." His smile was warm with approval. "Because tomorrow, we're going to see if that fire of yours can burn away the chains that have bound me to death for the past 6 centuries. The promise in his words sent a thrill of anticipation and terror through her in equal measure. Tomorrow, they would either free him from his curse or die in the attempt. Tonight, though, was theirs, and Sarah intended to make every moment count. Chapter 8. The breaking point dawn brought with it a visitor neither of them expected. Sarah woke to the sound of voices drifting up from the cabin's main room. Kale's familiar rumble and another voice. Distinctly feminine but carrying an authority that made the very air seem to vibrate with power. She dressed quickly, her newly awakened magical senses picking up something that made her wolf pace restlessly beneath her skin. Ancient magic. Older even than Kale's, and infinitely more dangerous. Reckless beyond measure, the woman was saying as Sarah crept to the top of the stairs. "Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? What forces are already moving because of your interference?" "I know exactly what I've done, Morgana." Kale's voice held a warning edge. "The question is why you care. You haven't shown your face in my territory for over 2 centuries. Because I hoped you had enough sense to avoid this particular brand of stupidity." The woman's laugh held no humor. "A firstborn, Kale? Really? After what happened to Ariana, I thought you'd learned your lesson about getting involved with women whose magic could destroy you." Sarah's blood ran cold. Whoever this Morgana was, she knew about Kale's past, about his first mate. And her tone suggested she'd been there to witness the tragedy firsthand. "Sarah is nothing like Ariana," Kale said firmly. "And this situation is nothing like what happened before. Isn't it?" Papers rustled. Morgana seemed to be consulting some kind of document. Young firstborn with awakening powers, check. Ancient alpha with more responsibility than sense, check. Political forces already circling like vultures, check. Her voice dropped to something dangerously soft. The only difference is that this time, the Council isn't content to simply eliminate the threat. They want to harness it. "What do you mean?" The sudden tension in Kyle's voice made Sarah grip the banister until her knuckles went white. "I mean they know exactly who she is, what bloodline she carries, and what she could become with the right guidance." Morgana's tone turned mocking. "Did you really think Marcus Blackthorn came up with the poisoning plan on his own? That a mid-level alpha would have access to the kind of suppressants that could hide firstborn magic for years? The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Council, the governing body that regulated supernatural affairs across multiple territories, had been involved in her systematic weakening from the beginning. "They've been watching her," Kale said, his voice hollow with realization. "All this time they knew what she was and they were waiting. Waiting for her to manifest? Yes, but also waiting for her to form a bond with someone powerful enough to be worth corrupting." Morgana's footsteps moved across the room, and Sarah caught a glimpse of flowing silver hair and robes that seemed to be cut from starlight itself. "Congratulations, Kyle. You've just handed them exactly what they wanted. A firstborn who's emotionally bonded to the most powerful alpha in existence." "They can't force magical bonds," Kale protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "They can't force true bonds, no, but they can manipulate circumstances, create artificial pressures, make alternatives seem impossible." Morgana stopped pacing, and her voice turned almost gentle. "Tell me, how convenient was it that the rogues attacked her exactly when you were in the area? How coincidental that Marcus chose last night, the night after her power fully awakened, to make his retrieval attempt?" Sarah felt the world tilt around her. Everything, her rescue, the attack, even her growing feelings for Kale, had it all been orchestrated? Were her emotions real, or just another manipulation by forces too vast for her to comprehend? "No." Kale's voice cracked like a whip. "What's between us is real, Morgana. I would stake my existence on it." "Would you? Even knowing that the Council has ways of influencing emotions, of making people believe they feel things they don't actually feel?" Morgana's tone was relentless. "Even knowing that they've had centuries to study the psychological profiles of both firstborn wolves and ancient alphas, they know exactly which buttons to push, which scenarios to create." Unable to bear any more, Sarah stepped into view at the top of the stairs. Both figures below turned to look at her, Kale with an expression of profound anguish, and the woman who could only be Morgana with something that might have been pity. Morgana was beautiful in the way that ancient things were beautiful, perfect and terrible, and utterly inhuman. Her silver hair flowed like liquid moonlight. Her skin held the translucent quality of someone who had transcended normal mortality, and her eyes were the deep purple of twilight, holding knowledge that predated civilization itself. "Sarah," Kyle said urgently, taking a step toward the stairs. "Whatever you heard?" "I heard enough." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I heard that everything I thought was real might be an elaborate manipulation designed to turn me into a weapon." "Not a weapon," Morgana corrected, her tone almost kind. "A conduit. The Council doesn't want to destroy you, child. They want to use you to control him." She gestured toward Kale. "An alpha bound by love is infinitely more manageable than one who stands alone." Sarah descended the stairs slowly, her mind racing through everything she'd experienced over the past few days. The connection she felt to Kale, the way their magic had merged so perfectly, the overwhelming sense of rightness when they were together. Had any of it been real? "How would they do it?" she asked quietly. "Manipulate emotions like that?" "Pheromone manipulation during vulnerable moments, magical suggestion planted in food or drink, environmental pressures designed to create trauma bonding." Morgana counted off the methods on her fingers like she was reciting a shopping list. "The Council has had a very long time to perfect their techniques." "But there would be signs," Kale protested. "Traces of magical interference, chemical residues." "Not if it was done subtly enough. Not if it was planned over years rather than days." Morgana's expression softened slightly as she looked at Sarah. "I'm not saying your feelings aren't real, child. I'm saying you need to be certain they're yours before you make any decisions that can't be undone." Sarah reached the bottom of the stairs and found herself caught between two ancient beings discussing her fate, as if she were a piece on a game board. The helplessness of the situation should have made her angry, but instead she felt oddly calm. "You're right," she said quietly, and both Kyle and Morgana turned to stare at her. "I need to be certain." "Sarah?" Kyle started, pain evident in his voice. "No, she's right." Sarah moved to the center of the room, equidistant from both of them. "If there's even a chance that what I feel has been artificially induced, then I need to know. Because if we're going to attempt something as dangerous as breaking your death curse, it has to be for the right reasons." Morgana raised an eyebrow. "You know about the curse?" "I know he made a bargain with death itself to gain the power to avenge his first mate. I know that bargain cost him his ability to feel warmth, to form true connections, to experience real joy." Sarah's gaze found Kale's across the room. "I also know that when we're together, that changes. The question is whether that change is real or manufactured." "There are ways to test it," Morgana said slowly. "Ways to strip away any artificial influences and see what remains. But the process is unpleasant. And if it turns out your bond is manufactured, the removal of that influence could cause significant psychological trauma. And if I don't test it, if I go forward with breaking his curse based on feelings that might not be real?" Sarah shook her head. "That could kill us both." Kale's face had gone ashen. "Sarah, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." She turned to Morgana, decision crystallizing in her mind. What would the test involve? A complete magical cleansing. Every external influence stripped away. Every artificial emotion burned out of your system. You would be left with only what is truly yours. Your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own choices. Morgana's expression was grave. "But child, if your feelings for him are genuine, experiencing their temporary removal could be one of the most painful things you'll ever endure. And if they're not genuine, then you'll be free to make choices based on truth rather than manipulation." Morgana glanced between them. "Either way, you'll know for certain where you stand." Sarah looked at Kyle, taking in his expression of desperate hope, warring with terrible fear. He wanted her feelings to be real. That much was obvious. But he also cared enough about her to want her to choose freely, even if that choice meant losing her. "How long would it take?" she asked. "The cleansing itself? A few hours? The recovery period afterward, regardless of the outcome, could be days." Morgana moved closer, her ancient eyes searching Sarah's face. "Are you certain about this? Once we begin, there's no stopping the process." Sarah closed her eyes, reaching deep into herself for the truth of what she wanted. When she opened them again, her resolve was absolute. "I'm certain. If Kale and I are going to have any kind of future together, it has to be built on truth. Not manipulation, not magic, not artificial bonds created by political machinations." She met his gaze across the room. "It has to be real." Kale's smile was heartbreaking in its mixture of love and terror. "If that's what you need, then that's what we'll do." "But Sarah—" His voice caught slightly. "If it turns out this was all manufactured, if you wake up from the cleansing and feel nothing for me, then we'll deal with that when it happens," she said firmly. "But Kyle—" "I don't think that's what we're going to find." "Why?" Morgana asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "What makes you so certain?" Sarah's smile was soft but utterly confident. "Because what I feel for him isn't just magical attraction or emotional dependency. It's recognition. Soul-deep recognition of someone who understands what it's like to be cast aside, to be used, to be told you're worth less than you actually are." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "That kind of connection can't be artificially created. It can only be discovered." The conviction in her voice seemed to resonate through the room, and she saw something like hope kindle in Kale's ancient eyes. "Very well," Morgana said finally. "We'll perform the cleansing at sunset, when the veils between worlds are thinnest. But I warn you both, what you learn about yourselves may change everything." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "It's time for some changes around here." Chapter 9. The Cleansing Truth. The hours before sunset passed like years. Sarah spent most of them alone in the cabin's library. Surrounded by ancient texts that Morgana had pulled from dimensions Sarah hadn't even known existed. Books written in languages that predated human civilization, their pages filled with diagrams of magical procedures that looked more like surgical instructions than spellwork. Having second thoughts? Kale's voice from the doorway made her look up from a particularly disturbing illustration of what appeared to be someone's soul being systematically dissected. "Third and fourth thoughts," she admitted, closing the book with a snap. "But not about whether we should do this. About whether I'm strong enough to survive it." He moved into the room, settling into the chair across from her with that fluid grace that marked him as something more than human. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Sarah. And I've met a lot of people over the past millennium. Strength isn't always enough." She gestured to the books surrounding them. According to these texts, the magical cleansing process involves systematically stripping away layers of consciousness until only the pure, uninfluenced core remains. Some people don't survive that kind of psychological excavation. Some people don't have a firstborn bloodline running through their veins, Kyle pointed out. Some people don't have magic powerful enough to literally bring warmth back to the dead. And some people don't have as much to lose if it all goes wrong. The words slipped out before she could stop them, revealing the fear she'd been trying to hide all day. Kale leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "What do you mean?" "I mean that if this cleansing reveals that everything I feel for you was artificially induced, I'll have lost the first real happiness I've ever known. The first time I've ever felt valued, cherished, worth protecting." Her voice grew smaller. "What if I go back to being that broken wolf who believed she was worthless? What if removing the magical influences takes away my confidence, my power, my sense of self-worth, along with whatever feelings might be fake?" The possibility had been haunting her all day, that the magical cleansing might strip away not just artificial emotions, but all the growth and strength she'd discovered since meeting Kale. That she might wake up as the same timid, rejected wolf who had stumbled through the forest 3 days ago. "Hey!" Kale's voice was gentle as he reached across the space between them, his fingers finding hers. "Look at me." She met his gaze, trying to draw strength from the steady warmth she found there. "Your strength doesn't come from me," he said firmly. "Your worth doesn't depend on magical bonds or artificial influences. You stood up to Marcus before you even knew what you were capable of. You saved my life by awakening power you didn't even understand. You chose to risk everything for truth rather than living with comfortable uncertainty." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "That courage, that integrity, it's all you, Sarah. Whatever the cleansing reveals about your feelings, it can't take away who you really are. How can you be so certain? Because I see you. Not your magic, not your bloodline, not whatever political value you might represent to others. I see the woman who would rather face potentially devastating truth than live a lie. The woman who chose to protect someone she barely knew because it was the right thing to do." His smile was soft and infinitely tender. "That woman is real, Sarah. Everything else is just details." The conviction in his voice made her throat tight with unshed tears. "What if the cleansing shows that you were right to stay alone all these centuries? What if I really am just another political manipulation designed to bring you down?" "Then I'll deal with it." His words were simple, but she heard the steel beneath them. I've survived 6 centuries of isolation, Sarah. I can survive whatever comes next, but I refuse to spend the rest of my existence wondering what if. Whether our bond is real or manufactured, whether our feelings are genuine or artificial, I need to know. We both do. Before she could respond, Morgana appeared in the library doorway like a wraith materializing from shadow. It's time, she announced, her purple eyes unreadable. The preparations are complete. Sarah's stomach clenched with nervous energy, but she stood with as much dignity as she could muster. What exactly will happen during the cleansing? I'll create a circle of pure magical energy around you, then systematically strip away every external influence you've been exposed to over the past several years. Pheromone manipulation, suggestion spells, environmental conditioning, even subconscious magical compulsions. Morgana's expression was grave. The process will be uncomfortable. You'll relive every moment of artificial influence as it's removed, experience the contrast between what was manufactured and what was genuinely yours. And afterward, you'll know with absolute certainty what feelings belong to you and what feelings were imposed upon you. Morgana's gaze flicked between them, including what you truly feel about Kale, stripped of any possible manipulation. They followed Morgana outside to the stone circle, where she had arranged an intricate pattern of crystals and burning herbs that filled the air with smoke that seemed to whisper secrets in languages Sarah didn't recognize. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded her painfully of her own magic. Last chance to change your mind, Morgana said as she began lighting candles at specific points around the circle. Sarah looked at Kale, drinking in the sight of him, the sharp lines of his face, the ancient wisdom in his blue eyes, the way he held himself with such careful control. If this was the last time she would see him with love in her heart, she wanted to remember every detail. I need to know, she said quietly. We both do. He nodded, though she could see the cost of that agreement in the tightness around his eyes. Whatever happens, Sarah, thank you. For 3 days of believing that happiness might be possible, for making me feel alive again, even if it turns out to be temporary. Kale? No. His smile was heartbreaking. Let me say this while I still can. I love you. Whatever the cleansing reveals, whatever truth we discover, that feeling, right now in this moment, is the most real thing I've experienced in centuries. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. I love you too, and I'm going to keep loving you. Artificial influences be damned. We'll see, Morgana said dryly, though her expression had softened slightly. Step into the center of the circle, child. It's time to learn who you really are. Sarah took her place among the crystals and burning herbs, feeling the ancient power of the stone circle responding to her presence. The carved symbols began to glow with the same golden light that emanated from her magic, and she felt the familiar warmth building in her chest. Remember, Morgana called out as she began to weave complex patterns in the air with her hands. Whatever you experience during the cleansing, don't fight it. Let the false influences be stripped away willingly, or the process could damage your mind permanently. I understand, Sarah said, though her voice shook slightly. The magical cleansing began as a gentle tingling sensation, like warm rain against her skin. Then Morgana's power hit her in full force, and Sarah's world exploded into chaos. She was reliving every moment of the past 3 years simultaneously. Every conversation with Marcus, every meal with the Nightingales, every interaction that might have been tainted by magical manipulation. But now she could feel the artificial elements like foreign objects under her skin. See the places where her natural responses had been subtly altered by outside influences. The poisoning was obvious now, not just the physical toxins that had suppressed her magic, but the psychological conditioning that had made her accept Marcus's growing distance, that had convinced her to doubt her own worth. Layers upon layers of manipulation, so subtle she'd never noticed them at the time. But as each artificial influence was stripped away, burned out of her system by Morgana's relentless power, something else became clear. The core of who she was remained unchanged. Her compassion, her strength, her desperate desire to be valued for herself rather than her usefulness, all of it was genuinely hers. And her feelings for Cale. The cleansing reached the past 3 days, and Sarah braced herself for the devastating revelation that her love had been manufactured. But as Morgana's power examined every moment of their connection, every flutter of attraction and deepening of affection, she found something that made her sob with relief. Truth. Pure, unmanipulated truth. Her attraction to Cale's strength had been real. Her recognition of a kindred spirit had been genuine. Her growing love for the man beneath the ancient power had belonged entirely to her. The council hadn't manufactured their bond. They had simply created circumstances where that natural connection could flourish. The rescue, the timing, even Marcus's attack had all been orchestrated. But the emotions those events had revealed had been waiting inside her all along, needing only the right catalyst to emerge. As the cleansing finally ended and Morgana's power withdrew, Sarah opened her eyes to find Cale kneeling beside her in the circle, his face etched with desperate hope. "Well?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Sarah's smile was radiant as she reached up to cup his face in her hands. "Hello, my love. Still want to break a death curse with me?" The joy that transformed his features was like watching the sun rise after the longest night in history. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that everything I feel for you is real. Manipulated circumstances, yes. Artificial emotions, absolutely not." She pulled him down for a kiss that tasted like freedom and truth and the promise of forever. "I'm saying that I choose you, Cale Stormwright. Not because of magic or manipulation or political pressure, but because you're the other half of my soul. And I choose you," he whispered against her lips. "My fierce, impossible, wonderful little wolf." "Touching," Morgana said dryly from outside the circle, though Sarah caught the hint of a smile on her ancient face. "Now, shall we discuss how to keep you both alive long enough to enjoy this newfound certainty? Because the council's agents will be here within hours, and they won't be as easily deterred as Marcus Blackthorn." Sarah looked up at Cale, seeing her own determination reflected in his blue eyes. "How much time do we have to break your curse before they arrive?" "Not nearly enough," he admitted. "But maybe just enough to try." "Then let's get started," she said, climbing to her feet with renewed purpose. "I didn't go through magical psychological surgery just to lose you to politics." Cale's laugh was full of genuine joy for the first time in centuries. "I love your optimism, even in the face of impossible odds." "I love everything about you," she replied simply. "Now let's go save your soul." Chapter 10. The Heart of Darkness. The curse-breaking ritual required blood. Not much, Morgana assured them as she arranged silver knives around the stone circle. Just enough to create a connection between your life force and the death magic that binds him. "But Sarah, you must understand. Once we begin this process, you'll be linked to Cale's curse. If something goes wrong, if the death magic proves stronger than your light, it could drag you down with him." Sarah looked at the intricate pattern Morgana had carved into the earth. Symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when she wasn't looking directly at them, as if the very concept of undoing death magic was too dangerous for reality to hold steady. "What are our chances?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Honestly?" Morgana's purple eyes were grim. I've never seen anyone attempt to break a bargain made with the entities Kale dealt with. The forces that granted him his power aren't known for their mercy or their willingness to renegotiate contracts. But it's possible? Kale's voice was carefully controlled, but Sarah could see the tension in every line of his body. There's a chance this could work? There's a chance, Morgana acknowledged. Your connection to each other is unprecedented. Life magic and death magic shouldn't be able to coexist, let alone complement each other the way yours do. That suggests something deeper at work than simple attraction or even fated mates. A distant howl echoed through the forest, too organized to be wild wolves, too purposeful to be random. The council's agents were getting closer. How much time do we have? Sarah asked, her newly awakened magical senses picking up the approach of multiple supernatural signatures. 20 minutes, maybe 30 if we're lucky, Morgana replied, her hands already beginning to glow with ancient power. Which means we need to start now, ready or not. Kyle moved to Sarah's side, his hand finding hers. Are you certain about this? Once we start, there's no stopping. If the curse tries to claim you, then you'll save me, she interrupted, surprising herself with her absolute confidence. Just like I'm going to save you. We're stronger together, remember? His smile was fierce with love and determination. Together, then. Morgana gestured for them to take their positions in the center of the circle. Kyle, you'll need to open yourself completely to the death magic. Let it flow through you without resistance. I know every instinct will tell you to fight it, to maintain control. But if you hold back even slightly, this won't work. And Sarah, she continued, you'll need to reach into that darkness willingly. Not to fight it, but to understand it. To find the point where Kale's life force connects to the entities that hold his contract, and sever that connection with your light. The concept sounded simple in theory. In practice, Sarah suspected it would be the most terrifying thing she'd ever attempted. What exactly did you bargain away? She asked Kale as they knelt facing each other in the circle. What price did you pay for the power to avenge Ariana? Kyle's expression grew distant, haunted. Everything that made me human. My ability to feel joy, to experience warmth, to form genuine connections with others. My capacity for hope, for love, for any emotion that wasn't rage or duty. His blue eyes met hers. I traded my soul for the power to destroy those who had taken her from me. But you can feel joy now. You can experience warmth. You do love me. Sarah framed his face with her hands, drawing strength from the solid reality of his presence. Because of you. Because somehow, your light calls to whatever small piece of my soul the entities left behind. His hands covered hers. But Sarah, if we do this wrong, if we sever the wrong connections, I could lose even that tiny fragment. I could become something truly monstrous. You could also become truly free. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched, free to feel everything you've been denied for centuries, free to love without reservation, free to choose your own path instead of being bound by ancient bargains. Another howl, closer this time. Morgana cursed under her breath and began the ritual without further preamble, her power filling the circle with energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Focus on each other, she commanded, her voice taking on harmonics that seemed to resonate in the very stones beneath them. Find the connection between your souls, and hold to it no matter what you see or experience. The ritual began gently, with Morgana's magic weaving around them like silk threads, seeking the bonds that tied Kale to his curse. But the moment her power touched the death magic within him, everything changed. Darkness exploded through the circle, not the mere absence of light, but something alive and hungry and utterly alien to anything Sarah had ever experienced. It poured from Kale like a black tide, carrying with it the whispers of entities that existed beyond death, beyond reality itself. So, a voice like grinding bones spoke directly into her mind. The little wolf thinks to steal what was freely given. How amusing! Sarah gasped as the voice hit her, but forced herself to maintain her connection to Kale. Through their bond, she could feel him fighting to stay present, to remain himself as the full force of his curse was revealed. "He came to us broken," another voice whispered, this one like the last breath of dying children. "Begged us for the power to avenge his loss. We gave him what he asked for, strength beyond measure, magic beyond mortal ken. The price was fair." "The price was monstrous," Sarah said aloud, her voice steady despite the terror trying to claw its way up her throat. "You took everything that made him who he was. We took what he offered, his joy, his warmth, his capacity for love. All freely given in exchange for the power to destroy his enemies." The darkness around Kale writhed like a living thing, and destroy them he did. Magnificently, thoroughly. The screams of those who tortured his mate echoed across dimensions. Through their connection, Sarah felt an echo of that ancient rage, the fury that had driven Kale to make his impossible bargain, the love for Ariana that had consumed everything else, that had made trading his soul seem like a reasonable price for vengeance. But she also felt something else. A tiny spark of light buried deep within the darkness, protected by barriers that felt familiar. Her own magic, somehow, reaching across time to the moment when Kale had made his bargain. "Impossible," the first entity hissed as it sensed her recognition. The contract was sealed, witnessed, bound by laws older than your species. "Maybe," Sarah said, her power beginning to pulse with golden light. "But you made one mistake. You assumed that what you took was all he had to give." She reached deeper into the darkness, following that tiny spark of light back to its source. And there, buried beneath centuries of rage and pain and artificial emptiness, she found it. Love. Not for Ariana. That love had been consumed by grief and transformed into vengeance. This was something different. Something the entities couldn't touch because it hadn't existed when the bargain was made. Love for her. Love for the future they could build together. Love that had grown from nothing, created by their connection, and nurtured by their shared understanding of loss and healing. "This changes nothing," the second entity snarled as it realized what she'd found. "The contract remains. He is ours until the stars burn out." "Wrong," Sarah said, her power flaring brighter as she wrapped her light around that tiny spark of preserved love. "He's mine, and I'm taking him back." The backlash was immediate and devastating. The entity's rage hit her like a physical force, trying to tear her consciousness apart, to break her connection to Kale and claim her as well. She felt her power wavering, her grip on that precious spark of love beginning to slip. But then Kale was there with her in the darkness, his own power joining with hers, their bond blazing like a star in the endless night of his curse. Together, he said without words, and she felt his absolute trust in her, his willingness to follow her into whatever came next. Together, she agreed and pulled with all her strength. The spark of love she'd found began to grow, fed by their combined power, spreading through the darkness like wildfire. Where it touched, the death magic began to unravel, the ancient bonds weakening as something newer and stronger took their place. "Impossible!" the entities shrieked in unison, their rage shaking the very foundations of the circle. "The contract cannot be broken." "Watch us," Sarah snarled, her power blazing so bright now that it lit up the entire forest. "Watch us choose love over vengeance, healing over rage, life over death." The darkness shattered. Kale collapsed forward into her arms, his body convulsing as centuries of suppressed emotions crashed through him all at once. Joy, sorrow, hope, fear, wonder. Everything he'd traded away flooding back in a torrent that would have destroyed a lesser man. But Sarah was there to catch him, to anchor him, to help him remember who he was beneath all that returned feeling. And as he clung to her, she felt the change in him like dawn breaking after the longest night. Warmth, real warmth, spreading from his heart through every inch of his body. The artificial cold that had marked him as something touched by death was gone, replaced by the natural heat of a man who was truly, completely alive. "Sarah," he whispered against her hair, his voice breaking with wonder. "I can feel everything. Everything." "How does it feel?" she asked, though she could sense the answer through their bond. "Like coming home?" he said, pulling back to look at her with eyes that blazed not with supernatural power, but with simple, human joy. "Like being reborn into a world full of possibilities I'd forgotten existed." Another howl split the night, much closer now, but this time neither of them flinched. "The council?" Kyle asked, his voice steady. "Let them come," Sarah replied, her power still blazing around them both. "They wanted to use a firstborn to control the Alpha King. Too bad for them. There is no Alpha King anymore. Just a man who's finally free to choose his own path." Kale's smile was radiant as he pulled her to her feet. "And what path would that be?" "The one that leads away from here," she said firmly. "The one that leads to whatever life we want to build together, free from curses and politics and other people's expectations." "I love the sound of that," he said, then paused as if savoring the words. "I love you, Sarah Moonweaver, with every part of my soul that's finally, truly mine again. And I love you, Kale Stormwright. Whoever you choose to be now that you're free to choose." The howls were getting closer, but Morgana was already preparing transportation spells, creating gateways that would take them far from the council's reach. "Ready to disappear?" she asked with a knowing smile. Sarah looked at Kale, seeing her own excitement reflected in his newly warm blue eyes. "More than ready." Together, hand in hand, they stepped through Morgana's portal and into their new life. Free, alive, and bound by nothing but their choice to love each other. Chapter 11. New Horizons. They emerged from the portal on a cliff overlooking an endless expanse of ocean, the salt-tinged air carrying promises of horizons yet to be explored. The moon hung full and bright above them, painting the waves in silver light that reminded Sarah achingly of Kale's eyes in their wolf forms. "Where are we?" she asked, marveling at the wild beauty of the place. Rugged stone and windswept grass, completely untouched by civilization. "Somewhere the council will never think to look," Morgana replied, her ancient face touched by the gentlest smile Sarah had ever seen from her. "An island that exists between dimensions, accessible only to those with the right magical signatures." She gestured to the cottage that sat nestled against the cliff face, its windows glowing with warm light. It was meant to be a sanctuary for the firstborn, back when such things seemed necessary. Now it can be a sanctuary for you. Kale moved to the edge of the cliff, breathing deeply of the ocean air. Even from behind, Sarah could see the change in him, the way he held himself without the rigid control that had marked him before. The natural ease that spoke of a man finally comfortable in his own skin. "How long has it been since you felt the wind?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. "I felt it," he said, his voice soft with wonder. But it was just sensation without meaning. Air moving across skin, temperature variations to be catalogued and dismissed. He turned to look at her, and his expression took her breath away. "Now it feels like freedom, like possibility, like the whole world opening up before us." Sarah slipped her hand into his, marveling at the natural warmth of his skin. No supernatural cold. No artificial heat. Just the simple human warmth of someone who was truly, completely alive. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "We have this beautiful sanctuary. We have each other. We have all the time in the world. What does a freed alpha king do with unlimited possibilities?" Kale's laugh was pure joy, the sound carrying across the water like music. "I have absolutely no idea. For the first time in 1,000 years, I can choose my own path instead of following the dictates of duty or curse or political necessity." He squeezed her hand. "What does a firstborn wolf with unlimited power do when she's finally free to be herself?" "Learn," Sarah said immediately. "About my heritage, my magic, what it really means to carry this bloodline. I want to understand what my parents were protecting, what they thought was worth dying for." "I can help with that," Morgana interjected, joining them at the cliff's edge. "This sanctuary contains the most complete archive of firstborn knowledge in existence. Histories, spellwork, genealogies going back to the very beginning of your people." "And after we learn everything there is to know?" Kale asked, his arm coming around Sarah's waist with natural ease. "Then we decide what comes next," Sarah replied. "Maybe we explore this dimension between dimensions. Maybe we find other refugees from the Council's manipulations and help them find their own freedom. Maybe we just build a life together and let the rest of the world sort itself out." "I like the sound of all of those options," Kale said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Especially the part about building a life together." Morgana cleared her throat delicately. "Before you get too settled in your domestic bliss, there are a few things you should know about your current situation." Something in her tone made both of them turn to face her fully. "What kind of things?" Sarah asked. "The kind that will determine whether this sanctuary remains safe or becomes a target." Morgana's expression was grave. Breaking Kale's curse sent ripples through the magical world that will be felt for centuries. The entities he dealt with are displeased. And the Council is scrambling to understand how a supposedly weak, rejected wolf managed to accomplish something their best mages declared impossible. "Are we in danger here?" Kale's voice had taken on the protective edge that Sarah was learning to associate with threats to her safety. "For now, you're hidden. But that won't last forever. Eventually, either the entities will track down the signature of broken death magic, or the Council will find a way to pierce the dimensional barriers." Morgana studied them both carefully. "The question is what you want to do about it." "What are our options?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Run. Hide. Hope that eventually the various forces hunting you lose interest or find bigger threats to focus on." Morgana's tone suggested what she thought of that option. Or, Kyle prompted, "or you take the fight to them. Use the power you've both demonstrated to start dismantling the systems that have been oppressing supernatural beings for centuries. The Council's manipulation of bloodlines, their political games, their systematic elimination of anyone who threatens their control." Morgana's purple eyes blazed with ancient fury. "You've already proven that their authority isn't absolute. With the right allies, you could prove it to the world." Sarah felt a thrill of possibility at the suggestion, followed immediately by a wave of exhaustion. "We just escaped from all of that. The politics, the power games, the constant threat of being used by people who see us as tools rather than individuals." "Did you?" Morgana asked gently. "Or did you simply change your position within the game?" "As long as the Council exists, as long as they continue their manipulations, there will always be other wolves like you were, rejected, poisoned, convinced they're worthless when they're actually precious beyond measure." The words hit home with devastating accuracy. Sarah thought of all the wolves who might be suffering as she had suffered, who might never get the chance to discover their true worth because the systems designed to protect them were actually designed to control them. "You're asking us to become revolutionaries," Kale said quietly. "To take on an institution that's held power for over a millennium. I'm asking you to consider what you want your freedom to mean," Morgana replied. "Personal liberation is wonderful, but it's also incomplete as long as others remain in chains." Sarah looked out over the moonlit ocean, her mind racing through possibilities and implications. The sanctuary was beautiful, peaceful, everything she'd thought she wanted. But Morgana was right. How could she truly enjoy her freedom knowing that others were still trapped in the same systems that had nearly destroyed her? "What would it look like?" she asked. "This revolution you're suggesting. Careful, methodical, built on truth rather than violence." Morgana's expression grew thoughtful. "Start by documenting the Council's crimes, the manipulations, the systematic poisonings, the elimination of bloodlines that threaten their control. Then find the other survivors, the wolves who escaped their notice or their direct control. Build a network of allies who understand what's really at stake. And then?" Kale's voice was carefully neutral, but Sarah could feel his interest through their bond. "Then you give people a choice. Show them what freedom actually looks like, what communities built on cooperation rather than control can accomplish." Morgana smiled, and for the first time, Sarah saw something genuinely hopeful in her ancient features. The Council's power depends on people believing they have no alternatives. You could become living proof that alternatives exist. Sarah turned to Kyle, studying his face in the moonlight. "What do you think?" "I think," he said slowly, "that for the first time in my very long life, I have the chance to use my power for something other than vengeance or duty, to build something instead of just protecting it." His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. "But only if you want to. I meant what I said about having all the time in the world. If you want to spend it learning about your heritage and building a quiet life together, that's what we'll do." The choice was entirely hers, and somehow that made it both easier and harder to make. No pressure, no manipulation, no hidden agendas, just two people trying to decide what they wanted their lives to mean. "I want both," Sarah said finally. "I want time to learn who I really am, to understand my power and my heritage. But I also want that knowledge to mean something beyond personal satisfaction." She looked at Morgana. "How long do we have before the various forces tracking us become a real threat?" "Months, perhaps a year if we're careful about masking your magical signatures," Morgana replied. "Long enough to learn what you need to know, to train your abilities properly, to build the foundation of whatever comes next." "Then that's what we'll do." Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. "We'll use this sanctuary to become everything we're capable of being. And then we'll go back out into the world and give other people the same chance." Kale's smile was radiant. A revolution built on love instead of power, on healing instead of vengeance, on the radical idea that every supernatural being deserves the chance to discover their own worth. He brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I can't think of anything I'd rather spend my freedom fighting for." "Excellent," Morgana said with satisfaction. "In that case, I suggest we start with the archives tomorrow. There's a great deal you both need to learn before you're ready to change the world." As they walked toward the cottage together, Sarah felt a sense of rightness settle into her bones. This was what she'd been meant for. Not to hide from her power, but to embrace it. Not to accept the limitations others placed on her, but to transcend them entirely. And she wouldn't be doing it alone. She had Kale beside her, his strength complementing hers, his ancient wisdom balanced by her fresh perspective. Together, They could accomplish anything. "No regrets?" she asked as they reached the cottage door. "About what?" he replied, genuine confusion in his voice. "About trading your lonely immortality for a complicated life with a stubborn firstborn who's apparently determined to take on the supernatural establishment." His laugh was warm and completely unguarded. "Sarah, my love, I've spent 1,000 years existing without truly living. If I get to spend whatever time I have left actually making a difference, with you by my side, then I'll count myself the luckiest man who ever lived. Even if it gets us both killed, especially if it gets us killed," he said, his voice growing serious. "Because at least we'll die as ourselves, fighting for something we believe in, instead of as pawns in someone else's game." Sarah stood on her toes to kiss him, tasting freedom and possibility and the promise of tomorrow on his lips. "I love you, Kale Stormwright, whatever your name becomes now that you're free to choose it. And I love you, Sarah Moonweaver, future revolutionary, keeper of my heart, and the woman who saved my soul." His forehead touched hers. "Ready to change the world? With you, I'm ready for anything." Chapter 12. Forever and Always. 6 months later, Sarah woke to the sound of waves and the feeling of warm lips pressing gentle kisses along her shoulder. Morning light streamed through the cottage windows, painting everything in shades of gold that reminded her of her own magic. Magic she now wielded with the confidence of someone who truly understood her own power. "Good morning, my love," Kyle murmured against her skin, his voice rough with sleep and contentment. She hummed, stretching luxuriously in his arms. "What time is it?" "Early enough that we have time for this," he said, his mouth finding that sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. "And late enough that Morgana will come looking for us if we don't appear for training soon." The past 6 months had transformed them both in ways Sarah could never have imagined. The archives had revealed the true scope of her heritage, not just magical power, but a bloodline that traced back to the very first werewolves, the ones who had bridged the gap between human and wolf through pure will and ancient magic. She'd learned to weave moonlight into solid barriers, to call healing fire that could mend both body and spirit, to communicate with the very essence of nature itself. But more than that, she'd learned who she was when she wasn't afraid. Confident, powerful, worthy of love and respect, not because of what she could do for others, but simply because she existed. Kale had undergone his own transformation. Free from the curse that had defined him for centuries, he'd rediscovered parts of himself that had been buried so long he'd forgotten they existed. His laugh came easily now. His smiles were genuine rather than calculated, and he'd developed an almost childlike wonder at simple pleasures. The taste of fresh fruit, the warmth of sunlight on his skin, the sound of Sarah's heartbeat when she slept curled against his chest. "What's on the agenda today?" she asked, turning in his arms to face him properly. Even after all this time, the sight of him still took her breath away, not because of his supernatural beauty, but because of the peace in his eyes, the contentment that radiated from every line of his body. "Morgana wants to show us the communication network she's been building," he replied, his fingers combing gently through her hair. "Apparently, she's found 3 more firstborn survivors, and they're interested in what we're planning." 3 more. That brought their growing alliance to 12 confirmed survivors of various supernatural bloodlines, all of them refugees from the Council's systematic oppression. Some were wolves like Sarah, others were different supernatural beings entirely, all of them united by the understanding that the current system was designed to break them rather than protect them. And after that, she traced lazy patterns on his chest, marveling at the steady beat of his very human heart. "After that, I thought we could take a walk along the cliffs. Maybe practice that new technique you've been working on, the one where you weave my shadows into your light." His eyes sparkled with mischief. Or we could just enjoy being together without any agenda at all. The suggestion made her smile. 6 months ago, the idea of time without purpose would have made her anxious. Now she understood that simply existing together, without pressure or expectation, was perhaps the most revolutionary act of all. "I love that we can do that now," she said softly. "Just be, without wondering if someone's watching or planning or trying to use us for their own purposes." "One of the many benefits of dimensional sanctuary living," Kale agreed, then grew more serious. "Though I'll admit, part of me is getting restless. All this training, all this preparation. Sometimes I wonder if we're just hiding in a very beautiful prison." Sarah understood the feeling. The sanctuary was everything they could have asked for. Safe, peaceful, filled with knowledge and possibility. But it was also isolated from the world they wanted to help change. "Morgana says we're almost ready," she reminded him. "A few more months of training, and we'll be strong enough to start making actual moves against the council." "I know, and I know she's right. We only get one chance to do this properly, so we need to be as prepared as possible." He pulled her closer, his arms tightening around her. "I just sometimes miss the feeling of forward momentum, of actively fighting for something instead of just preparing to fight." A soft knock at the cottage door interrupted their conversation. "Sarah? Kyle?" Morgana's voice carried through the wood. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but we have a situation that requires immediate attention." They were dressed and downstairs within minutes, finding Morgana standing in the main room with an expression of barely contained excitement on her ancient features. "What's happened?" Sarah asked, her magical senses picking up an unusual energy radiating from the older woman. "The council has made a mistake," Morgana said with evident satisfaction. "A big one. They've moved against the Silvermoon Pack in Montana, accused them of harboring firstborn sympathizers, and ordered their complete dissolution." Kale's expression hardened. "Silvermoon Pack? They're one of the most politically neutral groups in North America. If the council is moving against them..." "They're getting desperate," Sarah finished, understanding immediately. "They know something is changing, that their control is slipping, so they're overreaching." "Exactly." Morgana gestured, and a shimmering image appeared in the air between them. A map showing the location of Silvermoon territory, with red markers indicating council forces. But here's the interesting part. The pack isn't rolling over. They're fighting back. And they've sent out a call for help that's being heard across the supernatural community. "They want allies," Kale said, studying the tactical display. "People willing to stand with them against council aggression." "This is it," Sarah breathed, feeling a thrill of anticipation mixed with terror. "This is our chance to stop hiding and start acting." Morgana nodded. "If we can help Silvermoon survive this assault, if we can prove that the council's authority isn't absolute, it could be the beginning of everything we've been planning." "It's also incredibly dangerous," Kale pointed out, though his tone suggested he was already calculating strategies rather than trying to talk them out of it. "Going up against council forces directly, in the open, there's no coming back from that. No more hiding, no more preparation time." "Are we ready?" Sarah asked, looking between them both. "Really ready?" Morgana's smile was fierce. "Child, you've mastered more firstborn magic in 6 months than most of your ancestors learned in decades. And Kale?" She turned to him with something like pride. "You've remembered what it means to fight for something instead of just against something. If you're not ready now, you never will be." Sarah felt the truth of those words settle into her bones. She thought of everything they'd learned, everything they'd built together in this sanctuary, the knowledge, the power, the unshakable bond between them. All of it had been leading to this moment. "There's something else," she said quietly, a realization crystallizing as she spoke. If we do this, if we take this stand, we won't just be fighting for Silvermoon Pack. We'll be announcing to the world that the age of supernatural oppression is ending. A revolution, Cal said, his voice filled with wonder. An actual revolution, started by a rejected wolf who was supposed to be worthless, and an ancient alpha who was supposed to be too broken to care about anything. Poetic justice at its finest, Morgana agreed. So, are you ready to change the world? Sarah looked at Kyle, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. They'd found each other in darkness, had chosen love over fear, healing over vengeance, truth over comfortable lies. Now they had the chance to extend that same choice to others. Yes, she said firmly. We're ready. Then let's go save a pack, Kale said, golden light beginning to dance around Sarah's fingers as blue flames flickered to life around his. And maybe save our entire species while we're at it. As Morgana began preparing the transportation spells that would take them back to the world they'd left behind, Sarah felt a moment of perfect clarity. This was what love was meant to do, not just heal individual hearts, but inspire them to heal the world around them. She took Kale's hand, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease, their magic already beginning to merge in preparation for whatever battles lay ahead. Ready? He asked, his eyes bright with anticipation and absolute trust. With you? She smiled, feeling the truth of it down to her very soul. I'm ready for anything. Together, they stepped through the portal and into their destiny, no longer hiding from their power, but embracing it fully. No longer running from their past, but building a future worth fighting for. Behind them, the sanctuary remained, waiting for other refugees who might need healing and hope. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, danger, and the chance to prove that love really could conquer the forces of oppression and fear. It was exactly where they belonged,